You're gonna start, you want to start?
Go ahead, you start.
No, wait.
Okay.
No, either
I
way.
just want me to say a few words about it. So this morning, for those of you that saw my presentation this morning, part of that obviously feeds into this story. So I think that we're still going to be using silicon in spite of the fact that it's become more challenging to use it because scaling is not. You're in a position where you have to have choices. You either make the thing go faster or you make it consume less energy. You don't get both anymore. You still get an aerial performance improvement or advantage. And as long as that's true, it's going to mean that you can put essentially twice as many components on a chip for the same amount of money. So there's value in people building really fast, providing the consumption's there. I think we're going to see 3D stacking, which I touched on this morning, and that will change a lot of the ways we think about architectures, because it's going to change, radically change latencies and bandwidths between various components in the system. So that could be very interesting. I think multi-core is going to happen in select areas where parallelism makes sense. But I also expect to see heterogeneous systems for most. So the embedded world, in a sense, has been ahead of the curve because they, for a very long time, been building systems on a chip, and that's going to be more the case. It's going to be it's a good way of saving energy because you can tailor each one of the components to application-specific domains. And the other thing that's going to show up is the reliability issue, whether or not memories are going to be, if you keep shrinking the geometries, whether the memories will be stable and whether or not the computations will be stable. So, that remains to be seen exactly how bad that's going to be. There's going to be some stories there. See, you can cut down, you can get rid of reliability issues by margining the device sizes, and the question is whether you want to do that, because of course you're losing some of the advantage of going to smaller nodes. So you may have to accept, if you want to take full benefit of it, you may have to accept some reliability issues and then look at other techniques for mitigating that. So I think there's a lot of interesting challenges coming up.
Okay, so let me set the context a little bit. I can't remember whether it was last year or the year before, but late in one of the sessions, the speaker said something, and then during the questioning, Trevor and I ended up disagreeing with each other. We often agree, and we sometimes disagree. And it got pretty heated, and a lot of people in the audience joined in. And many people felt that that was the most exciting unit of time for the whole conference. The fact that everybody was engaged and people were bringing out interesting insights into the issue, and went far beyond what was in the paper that was in the conference. And so, after the conference, one of the organizers, and I can't remember whether it was Stefan or Yamo or Yogi or Weber, came up to us and said, could you organize a panel that captures this kind of energy? This is the tail end of the first day. The conference is in the spirit of Stamatis, where you spend the first half of the day arguing vigorously, and then you spend the rest of the day enjoying the sea and the beer and the food and the weather and everything else. So the sense was, can we put together a panel that would be the latter part of each morning? We pick a topic. In fact, Trevor and I went around and around on email to try to figure out what was a topic that could engage the audience and have meaningful conversation, meaningful insights, and at the end of the 3 days, maybe even have something that makes sense that could be a stepping stone to the future. what we came up with was what should the microprocessor look like 10 years from now and why? What are the challenges? Trevor already referred to some of them. And he got a couple of them wrong, but he usually does. Reliability is, the frequencies we run at today, reliability, you can't not deal with it. At these frequencies, 2 inputs to an AND gate might both be 1. The output of the AND gate will then be 1. By the time it hits the input to the next gate, it's been flipped to a 0 by some alpha particle that shouldn't have been there. So there's a lot of things to talk about, and if I shut up, he can then come back with his intelligent response. The hope is that it's not just the 5 of us, that it's everybody here that will contribute to this dialogue. He mentioned that embedded has been ahead of the curve forever. That's true. I would argue the reason for that is because embedded deals with a specific domain where general purpose deals with the world, and it's easier to tailor to a specific domain than it is to tailor it to do everything. And it goes on and on. Up on the board you see there several bullets. ILP, people have been saying ILP is dead, which is nonsense. It's still important. But maybe many of you think it's not important, so there's room for a dialogue there. Trevor agrees with me that the future chips are going to be heterogeneous. It's still the case that many of the companies are saying, no. The chips, they're going to be huge numbers of transistors, will make it all homogeneous. So what do people think about that? And it just goes on and on. What are the challenges? What do we think has to be done? What makes sense to deal with? What makes sense to say it's not important? 3D is important for several reasons, and Trevor identified a couple of them just a few minutes ago. But there's some things that may not be important, and yet there's a lot of people spinning their wheels, wasting time, doing things that is good work, but in some sense meaningless work. So the hope is that at the end of these 3 days that we will have had enough dialogue that, who knows, maybe we can generate a white paper or something to send forward and say, hey, this is what the chip 10 years from now should look like. And obviously I have technical things to say, but I think in the spirit of getting this thing moving, I'd rather not do technical things right now, but leave that to the others and you guys, and then we'll all get engaged, I hope. So, which of you 3 guys wants to go first? Good. Per, Professor Per Stenstrom, the endowed chair from Chalmers University in Göteborg. How'd I do?
Wow.
Was that good? Was that good?
Really good.
For the illiterate, that's Gothenburg.
All right.
Really?
Do I need a microphone? You can hear me on the last row? Okay. So I don't need a microphone.
Oh, good.
Okay, so what would the ship look like in year 2020? I'm gonna, probably destroy the ears down there. So I tried. Yeah, that's really. I think it was enlightening, very enlightening with Trev's keynote this morning. Really, I mean, the biggest challenges are, of course, to improve efficiency, compute efficiency and power efficiency by 2 orders of magnitude, something like that. That's if we just continue, obviously, with doubling the number of cores, that's not going to make the trick. But I'm kind of optimistic with multi-core. I've always been. In fact, my professor, my PhD supervisor, some 25 years ago said that this was the technology of the future, and I just trusted him, and then I continued, and I just continued, and I just continued. So multi-core is obviously, I think there is, what's going to happen over the next 10 years is, obviously a lot of people are obviously today trying to unlock parallels. So certainly multi-core is sort of a viable path, but obviously I'm scared to death with the big challenge of power efficiency. So it's pretty clear that we will have to make all the cores much more power efficient, and I don't think that, I mean, it's going to be, we can continue just doubling the number of cores. It's going to be heterogeneous multi-cores we're going to see. ILP, well, that's certainly not the dead end. In fact, I mean, there are so many limit studies that have been published that there is a huge amount of ILP in the applications that we haven't figured out how to get to. And it's a very big danger to bet on multi-cores and forget about exploiting instruction level parallelism inside the cores. But again, I mean, power efficiency is going to obviously rule out a lot of alternatives in that direction. Reconfigurable. That's a toughie to me. It's not pretty clear. What I really like with reconfigurable, and that's now the challenge for the future, is obviously design complexity and really be able to mastering complexity. There, I think reconfigurable processors is an interesting path to continue, because we could play with one structure and adjust it to the particular computational needs. Obviously, we all know that tailor-made cores will provide a high power efficiency and compute performance efficiency. But the problem is, of course, the long design time, long design time that needs that. So that's where I think we really should continue with the reconfigurable technology. I mean, CMOS, yes, but silicon, yes, but obviously we are going down the drain here. Going really following a path where everything is going to look worse for every day. Reliability issues and these things scare me a lot. I think I stopped there.
Professor Manolis Katevenis, the senior professor at the University of Crete.
Thank
and
you.
the designer of the first RISC chip.
Not the first.
Well, the first it was.
First university.
But
Second
certainly-
version of first university.
And I won't tell them the year because that would date you.
So, although I have opinions on all the questions that you have asked, I would rather start with something slightly different, which I consider interesting. So, for a number of years, I have been making analogies between the way processors work together and the way people work together. From that point of view, I believe that computer science and engineering may be in their infancy still, because what sequential programming does, the kind of software that everybody writes, is to describe how a single worker, imagine a single person, imagine a single employee, imagine a company that has a single person in it. So sequential programming describes how that worker, that employee, should perform the task that he wants to perform. Now we are talking about controlling hundreds or thousands of processors, and that's the equivalent of controlling a company or a big factory that has hundreds or thousands of employees. Now, imagine mankind. Is it the same way how you instruct one person to perform a task and how you organize and to manage a big company or a factory? There are entire fields of studies which, well, in Greece at least there is an entire degree called production engineering, dealing exactly with that problem. There is operation management, there is business administration. Throughout the world, people get masters and other degrees in business administration. So why do people study for entire lives or for their entire profession how to organize parallel things, parallel companies? Why don't they study, or why don't they just describe how a single worker, a single employee would do something and then let the rest of it be done automatically? Well, obviously, if you think about mankind, the difficult part is the parallelism, not the other. Or I mean, both of them are difficult, but they are different as well. So, in my view, in the long term, there is no way that efficiency in parallelism can be achieved without the cleverness of people, at least today it looks like the cleverness belongs to people and not to artificial intelligence. So there's no way that efficient parallelism will be done by the programmer ignoring the parallel nature. And like there are people who dedicate their entire life on being managers or business administration, the same way, possibly in the future, there should be people who dedicate their lives to parallel programming. Some of them, not everybody, becomes a manager, a CEO of a company. So, I move forward with the analogy. One of the factors, of the very important factors of how you organize production in human factories is how you transfer goods or how an employee does his task. So, if it is a single employee who does something and needs to buy some material goods for that thing, and he goes to the local supermarket and he buys what he needs for the day, and then next day he goes again and buys what he needs again. That's very different from a big factory that needs to process things based on, for example, a mass shipment of goods that they order from China or from somewhere else, far away. And obviously, the further away you bring data or goods from, the more you organize them in bigger quantities, and the more carefully you schedule them. So, in my view, transfer granularity of data now, future chips, transfer granularity of data inside the chip as well as outside the chip, and scheduling of when those transfers happen and when the processing happen is a major concern for software, must be a major concern for software and for people as well. Like it cannot be ignored in mankind when businesses operate. And so software must have a saying on that. Okay? So from that respect, simple cache coherence, simple hardware managed cache coherence cannot be the solution. You need to enhance it with ways for software to have a saying. I'm not saying that everything should be controlled or done by software, but I'm saying that simply relying on hardware for automatically deciding when things are transferred and in what volumes and what things are transferred is not going to work, like it doesn't work in mankind when people organize things in parallel. So, I should stop.
And the audience intervene.
I'm sorry?
And the audience intervene and say
So we could do that, or we could wait. So what Trevor and I had thought would be that we'd let each of the people up here first make a statement, and then we'd invite people from the audience to also make a statement, and then we'd have the dialogue go, and the dialogue we hope will go for the next few days. So if you have this burning need, you need to do it now. Certainly I'm going to let you do it, but if you hold off, okay, fine. But keep it because we want it on the floor.
we will not forget, we will not.
Could somebody help the Bulgarian out? Which way did you come in?
So it's
Chris Flautner is a PhD from Michigan, who is the Vice President of R&D for ARM. What do you call yourself? ARM Corporation?
ARM
Inc.
ARM Holdings,
ARM Holdings.
PLC. The flippant answer is I don't know what that thing will be. It'll have lots of ARM cores. But I think that one thing we know. I think we know more things about that computer in 2020. I mean, I have a one-slide summary kind of copied Yale's idea of having one transparency and then talking about it for days or years, actually, in this case. But I have a one-slide summary that says, okay, the problem is there's one metric to optimize for. It's functionality divided by energy times dollars. So that is the metric that will be driving the industry for the next 10 years. And I think, and it kind of tells you what the problems are. I think mobile computers and energy-constrained computing is going to be the driving force in the foreseeable future. I think that has been the driving force in embedded computing, and that's the reason why it evolved the way it has, with heterogeneous accelerators. Basically, it's a much harder problem than the mainstream computer guys have been addressing, and the embedded people came up with solutions that they managed to deploy. They are very imperfect solutions, and in many ways they're very ugly solutions, but nobody has so far come up with anything better. And as the constraints moved, back probably in the 50s it was about functionality. Could you just get any computer to work, please? Then after a while it became functionality, for the mass market it became functionality divided by dollars. In the 90s it became functionality divided by dollars times power, because power became a constraint for computers. Nowadays, it's actually functionally divided by energy times dollars, and I think that constraint is harder than all the others beforehand. And the embedded world has a path to a solution there that I think is now going to proliferate into the broader industry. But it throws open a huge number of issues about how you program these things, how you reuse them, how you make them as general as possible without compromising energy budgets, and how do you reduce their costs. I think the other thing we know about 2020 that most of that chip is going to be memory. Just like a chip today is, at least half of it is some sort of memory structure, but actually if you count register files and everything else, it's probably already 70%, 80%. That chip in 2020 probably is going to be 95% memory, and in a 3D package it'll incorporate DRAM, other layers of caching, and essentially try to capture as much of the memory hierarchy as possible, because today that's where most of the inefficiencies are. I kind of agree with Manolis' point on well, you have to coordinate these transactions, and you have to worry about locality, and you have to move them so that you can actually, act on that information and make decisions on. I think the other thing that will still be true in 2020 is we will still be pretending that Moore's law is continuing, and there's an enormous economic interest in pretending that that's the case. But if you actually look at these processes, they have not been scaling for a while. They're, the thing we're calling 45 isn't, the thing we're calling 22 isn't. 22, it's more like 40, if not 65 nanometer. Yeah, sure, it has a few feature sizes that are scaled, but overall they're not scaling. I think in 10 years, I'm hoping somebody's going to invent some new materials that actually get deployed and make everybody else's life a bit easier. It's unclear what that will be. Graphene maybe, somebody may be able to incorporate that into a CMOS process to allow people to actually build the things you want. But unless that happens, the next 10 years is going to be struggle. And I think much of the worry is going to be about how people reduce power and make the thing more energy efficient without getting anything from the process guys, because the process may give you a large density, but it's certainly not giving you any power reduction and not significant frequency improvements. 3D, yes, I think all these things will be in a 3D box, but I'll stop now and let you get it.
So this function you're optimizing, what are units of functionality?
I think that's the market-driven thing that evolves. I mean, I think in a simplistic case for a processor core, it's how fast it runs an application. But I think there's other things like security that becomes the standard platform.
So somebody doesn't care, there's somebody that does not care about performance at all. In which case, I guess we'll build, instead of having an ALU, we'll have a full adder. So we will bit serially run the thing through, and we'll get minimum cost and minimum area and minimum everything, except we'll take forever to add two numbers together.
And that's the microcontroller space today. And
Did you do bit serial?
not bit serial, but they don't have a multiplier, they just fake it.
No, I understand that, but
They do bit serial. My consulting company,
does bit serial addition.
built a computer that does exactly that.
Bit serial addition.
Yes, and it's in
And it's
millions, it's in millions, probably more than that. There's a list.
Functionality includes whether you can run the task in time for whoever waits for it.
Agreed.
If it's a human that waits, it's 200 milliseconds. He's willing to wait.
I think it's a broader metric than performance, that's all it is.
I mean, the majority of things are not.
I don't like dollars, because I think when you're as driven.
Please give me yours.
I can't believe I handed you that. Anytime you're driven by dollars, I think you lose sight of the more fundamental notion.
Oh, I think engineering is basically.
Absolutely, engineering is what any damn fool can do for a dollar, an engineer can do for a dime. That's what engineering is. But at the same time, if we're talking about something, there's a difference between an engineering problem that is a solution to what we want tomorrow and looking 10 years out. And then I think the attributes of the thing change. No?
But even 10 years out, I think that the steps on that road are made with that decision. If you look at why process technology is advancing the way it is, it's because people are kind of second guessing, well, do I need to buy this other type of stepper, or can I use the old technology for another 2 years? And that has then a compound impact on 10 years from now. It's not that far away.
I think process technology keeps evolving because. Go ahead. Okay, so.
So I kind of agree with Krisztian that you have to really separate what technically makes sense from what economically makes sense. I mean, something might be the best technical solution, but in particular, computer architecture is driven by volume and it's driven by economics. So you can have a very nice technical solution, but if only 100 people are going to buy it, you're not going to build it.
So I insist that is the difference between a solution for a problem that we want to solve today that's going to be available in the marketplace a year from now or 2 years from now, from looking 10 years out. And if we adopt that mentality that you suggest for stuff 10 years out, then I just don't see us. I think what we're doing is we're pruning the tree before we've had a chance to expand what's possible.
No, I don't think that's what it says. It says that whatever, even if you're a bigger stream now, and in 10 years, it must meet the criteria that's cost effective. It doesn't necessarily have to meet it today, but by the time it comes to market, it needs to be very.
Certainly that's true, but it's hard. I would say it's impossible. Well, maybe it's just very hard to be able to put those dollar constraints on something that far out.
It is. I completely agree with you. That's why this is such a hard metric.
Anybody else want that? Go
I
ahead.
think there's agreement with both of you, and I think the community needs people who look at solutions for the next day and also further ahead. We cannot afford not to look 10 years down the road, but we cannot ignore dollar issues for solutions that are needed tomorrow. Right? So I think the community needs to look at a very broad spectrum of things, down the road, very advanced things that are not marketable at the moment. And they don't make any sense if we count them in dollars, but we also need to solve.
So that's certainly true, but the purpose of this activity we're going through right now is looking 10 years out, not looking tomorrow. And by the way, 10 years is different from 50 years. For example, there are yo-yos out there that thinks that you can store a 0 and a 1 at the same time in, I don't know, one magnetic core. I guess the flux will go both ways at the same time or something like that. And there's a lot of hype about that. And maybe 50 years from now, we'll make computers that can do that. But I don't see it 10 years out. For example, my personal opinion about that one item. So you had a statement you wanted to make?
Yeah, I had a comment.
Good. No, go ahead.
I very much like Manolis' analogy, the way he put it. In fact, I used something similar a long time ago to describe parallel computers. But I describe them as a bureaucracy. The more people you put to work in a bureaucracy, the slower it gets.
What does that have to be?
The problem is how much the people who work on a big task have to communicate among them. That's another issue that's
why the government is ruled by bureaucrats, but companies are led by
Exactly, exactly. We should build software like companies, not like bureaucracies. So communication among the workers is key. Not just what he needs to bring from the outside world, not just the material they want to bring in, but how much they need to communicate in order for each one of them to complete their own task. Right? In bureaucracy, no employee can do anything without getting 10 more signatures from others. That's why nothing moves, right? So if we write programs this way,
So not like the Greek government before the economic crisis.
yeah, exactly. That's where I take my analysis from.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but that's exactly also what Manolis stated. He stated that we should write the software like the efficient companies, not like the government. And so, and I would like to get the discussion in a little bit more technical direction. So particularly, like, so for example, of course, I can certify Manolis is advocating for that example for many years. We did discuss it several times. I like it very much. But the technical details that he mentioned, that we should start expressing this different grain cost of the communication a little bit up to the software, so that we allow this CEO-style Google programmer to be able to manage the vehicle locality efficiently. Yes, we definitely should do so. And in addition to, I always found strange, not to say stupid, that we have a memory which is a two-dimensional array. What programmers think of is a linear array of addresses. You know, this is kind of not efficient, right? We can make use of this two-dimensional nature of the memory array while managing the data locality. That's one of the things that Manolis also mentioned. So, indeed, now the thing is, we can certainly not go and express everything to the software and I do it the VLIW way and say, okay, you guys build compilers for runtime systems that can efficiently manage that. There should be a hardware-software solution that really, in a balanced way, dynamically manages such parallel systems. So, Alex, this is, as you know, one of the things that we try to do in a project that we are lucky to get today. So, but I'm not saying that we have a solution, so we're also looking for a branch and looking.
So I think, somebody had a comment? No. So I think Manolis hit the nail on the head, frankly. And he didn't make it as extreme as what I've been hearing. He said, not, if I understood him correctly, he said the software's not going to do it, but we ought to involve the software in the solution. So like pragmas in the language, because the programmer knows better what can be done in parallel and what can't. The individual worker that he said in the company, so you kind of played that down, which I would equate to the ILP thing, so that if it's in a company, for example, and supposing the company is a hospital, and supposing you need brain surgery, does it matter which processor does the brain surgery, or will anyone do, just so long as we have enough communication? So, you know, carrying the analogy to the cockamamie extreme, we, I think, need the functionality of the single stream, the communication between the streams. He pointed out transfer granularity of data, critical. There's so many products that have been a disaster because it doesn't have the transfer. It doesn't effectively transfer at the right granularity. I believe that the place that starts is at the algorithm layer. And you heard me talk for years about breaking the layers, and I think that's exactly what you said, breaking the layers between things. But I think Manolis has hit on just an incredibly important thing, that how to get these things to play together and at what level you imbue certain characteristics. Now, how we get that to play out in the chip 10 years from now, you know, I invite you to tell me. Luigi?
So, if you look at the past, computer architecture has always been highly influenced by applications. And if you just discuss technology, like for Prof here, we might miss something. So what are the challenging applications that are going to turn our minds out and are going to require radical differences in computer architecture? Right, guys? It doesn't matter, applications don't matter.
No, I think
applications matter. I mean, but it isn't always the case that you chase applications. Sometimes you get a capability that opens up an opportunity that you didn't think about. So it's a chicken and egg issue between technology and application.
That's why actually, indeed, we also, I was ready to, of course, refer to the breaking the layers, but I forgot I would get something. So the thing is, being able to customize to the application, right? To basically tune your system and bring hardware, software components to the application that you execute a particular moment in time, or to the face of the application. This is a critical issue. At least that's why I like the configurable. So we could disagree on some of the points, so most of this does not like the configurable very much as far as I know, but sorry.
I mean, I think I still like to keep my dollar sign in that equation, and I think one of the reasons why it's important, it does constrain kind of what actually, like reconfigurable primarily isn't a solution to most of these problems because of that dollar sign problem, and I think that will continue to be the case. I think what the pragmatic approach has been in actually most of the computers is we start growing large chunks of silicon dedicated to an application problem. I mean, notice we have a graphics processor. The mainstream world's a bit late on putting that graphics processor right next to the CPU, but they're kind of slowly doing it. But that's how it's been like in a mobile phone for years. It's just more efficient, and it's also dedicated to applications that that actually do graphics processing. And yes, some people then make the observation they're also good for other things, and maybe expand the capabilities of that big blob. But I think that's how we'll be evolving. Kind of like look at your body, you have different organs dedicated from the same building blocks, to being good at one particular set of functions. And we have the processor, we have the graphics units, the video unit is often separate, but that kind of actually probably merges with the graphics one longer term. You have a wireless network processing unit in most SoCs, which deals with the baseband processing for wireless, and those are the things we see right now. And I think the next 10 years, I'm not sure if we're going to grow any new ones on the side. I think one of the things that may be driving more of the multi-core evolution is being able to do with workloads that are mapped to multi-cores, like search, which require capabilities that they currently don't have in the memory system, scatter gather type stuff, and that you could then incorporate. But I don't actually think that you're going to see. I'm not sure if this computer in 10 years is going to grow another head that's actually for a different set of applications. I think what you'll see is a lot of optimization and kind of between these components and how they communicate to each other.
I think we're seeing something that really strange in that case. And the architecture has been progressing as applications have demanded more and more performance. And we're at a critical point now where not only applications are not demanding more and more performance, we actually see the other way around. There's essentially two applications that people run, email and web browser. Okay, I was going to say video conferencing, but youngsters actually like texting rather than seeing people. So that's why we see more and more people relying on these things rather than those things. And that's why the iPad is selling by the million. And the embedded is getting ahead of the high-performance architecture because there's no such killer application coming, and we don't see it. Search, there's data centers for that, so there's going to be a huge split. So you're going to do the processing on one side, and you're just going to have your tiny total result sent wirelessly to your embedded device. Is this really the thing that we see forward? Because if there's no clear application, there's no need for multi-cores other than data centers. Okay? There's no need for reconfigurable stuff other than specific application stuff. Okay? are we actually going to do the 3D stacking and all the stuff for low cost devices?
Yes.
Okay, so is this the separation
It's
of
in
the
your
interface
pocket
versus
right
the
now,
compute
you
side?
got a cell phone. I said, the stacking's in your pocket if you got a cell phone. There's a lot of reasons to do it. Other than
One of which is
performance.
space saving, but
The obvious one is space saving.
But I mean, 10 years isn't that far away. I think you can see the driving applications, and I think a lot of them are essentially how you transition things that we got used to on the desktop into something that's cheap and very energy efficient. And I think that transition is actually not trivial. Some people can do a good job with a web browser on an iPad, and a lot of people struggle because actually it isn't trivial to get that working efficiently and fast enough. And the iPad, you can probably see 3 or 4 generations of improvement on that too. I do think one application class I would quite like to happen in the next 10 years is kind of like the virtual window, a teleconferencing system where you can actually look somebody in the eye. And I've looked at a lot of teleconferencing, because that could replace travel. Basically, a lot of the travel is because you want to shake hands and look at somebody when you make contact. And if we've actually developed some technology that actually allows you to do that, that would be interesting, but that's not something that's available today. And but I'm also not sure how much new
Not
architecture.
because of compute power or because of bandwidth issues?
I think it's not that because people actually don't know how to do it.
We don't understand the algorithm.
Because it's actually quite it's a virtual window where, so for example, if I had a window pane on this wall and I could dial in that, now this is connected to Ann Arbor or it's connected to Cambridge, and it actually functions like a window. It's a very simple kind of metaphor, but it's a very, very difficult thing to deliver. How do you reorient somebody's gaze to actually look at you? How do you track a lot of features? You have to track people that are looking at the window, and you have to track people on the other side. It's a very involved computation, and actually none of the research that's out there actually shows a solution even in prototype form, even though a lot of people have been looking at this area. I think with carbon trading and all that stuff, those type of solutions may actually come to the forefront of applications, because I think they could actually, I would love one of these, I would cut down on travel, my own travel, significantly.
And in fact, that'd be fantastic, to be able to look in someone's eye and cut down on the travel. How about cars that drive themselves? So that when you get into your car and you get in the back seat of your car, you sit down, the weight sensitizes and kicks in the computer that says, "Where to, master?" You say, "Home." And then it recognizes the voice and looks it up on the table and then kicks it to the GPS and drives you home. Except that it's got to drive you home without getting into an accident. And that's incredibly difficult and is compute intensive, and we have no idea how to do it. So 10 years from now, will cars be able to drive themselves? There's a killer application. How about curing cancer? Well, that may be limited in the sense that it's one application that only we're not going to be able to sell 10 billion iPhones to cure cancer, but it is an important problem that is compute intensive and requires some major breakthroughs in algorithms and processing power to be able to do. I guess my point is that if we get our job done right, the job that we're looking at here is what the processor will look like 10 years from now. If it's better, and I guess I'm guilty of, we're looking at functionality as #1 performance, and of course the rest of the panel will beat me up about that. But a next generation or a 10-year generation out processor, if it has far more performance, becomes an enabling event to allow people to attempt to solve problems that can take care of that functionality. Which is to say that there are a lot of things out there that nobody will even address because there's no computer that can handle it. If I want to predict tomorrow's weather, not here, let's say in, I don't know, in Ann Arbor or something. And I can write a program that will give me tomorrow's weather 2 weeks from now, it doesn't do me any good. It's got to give me tomorrow's weather an hour from now.
That's probably going to be something that's centralized. That particular case. Something centralized naturally, I was going.
And the cancer thing may be centralized also.
But your example about the car, you're not going to have Google figure out
No, that's right.
Drive your car while you're in it. You really don't want it.
That's correct. So you want to have all the process that, so it's not only driving your car, it's avoiding accidents.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's the big application right now, is safety factors.
Sure.
So
But I think the safety in this environment where the car is moving and there are other cars moving and, you know, the GPS thing is solved. The sitting, kicking in the computer and you say home and it recognizes it, and that's solved. But all these things moving concurrently and not have an accident is tremendously compute intensive. And by the way, we will sell, how many automobiles are there out there, you know? So I don't know, maybe, so actually I'm from the US where, you know, you have a car for yourself and a car for your spouse and your kids that reach the age of 16 and your dog, I guess he has his own car also. Maybe the rest of the world doesn't do that, but there's tremendous volume there, I think.
Should I disappoint you, Yale? Because in the low country of the Netherlands, they try to do that with buses. Shuttle buses between the long-term parking and the terminal on Schiphol. Actually, not even the terminal, just to get closer to the terminal. They did try to automate. They failed miserably many times.
I'm sorry?
They failed miserably many times, and there were fast trucks, there was no other traffic than all these buses that were supposed to just drive automatically, and they canceled the project. So they did it like 3, 4, 5 years ago. So
And this was
apparently, even in very simplistic case, this automated driving is a very complex problem.
It is very complex, but it's getting there piece by piece. I mean, you know, you buy now self-parking cars are on the market today, and there's a whole bunch of effort too. Is it 10 years or 15? I don't know, but I think it's something that will happen on that time scale.
So I don't want to say, this was the Dutch that tried this.
I was waiting.
I could, I'm sorry, with a Bulgarian involved. I couldn't resist it. But what was the processor that was running at, and how good were the algorithms? So my point is that there's the fact that they tried it and failed, and it was in a much more constrained thing, says nothing about if we get our job done and provide the compute capability and the memory thing which was brought up, which is absolutely correct, that 90% of the chip is going to worry about the memory. But if we get the thing right and we get the algorithms right, maybe they won't fail 15 years from now. Alex wanted, I think Alex or Luigi, one of them wanted, Luigi I guess, wanted a application that is really out there that's going to make this happen. I would argue that that's a simple application. I can say it in one sentence. I want my car to be able to drive me home when I get into the back seat and sit. What did I say, use 15 words?
Okay,
Well, it's more difficult to make it happen. What?
Self-driving car is a shortened sentence.
Self-driving car. That's good. So I said it in 3 words.
So it says
Actually,
here,
Chris said it in 3 words.
the Google knowledge says here that there are 600 million motor vehicles in the world, and there are going to be 1.2 billion by 2030.
How many cell phones are there?
1.2 billion per year. Look at that.
1.2 million per year? Million per year. Okay. Oh, same thing with the cars. You know, there are some people that buy a new car every year also, right? I guess more people buy a new cell phone every year.
Not in this room.
That's because you're engineers and you don't throw things away. But people like me and Trev, we just throw them away when they're...
Go ahead.
So maybe we can almost approach it from the other way and say, what will the processor of 2020 not care about? Because everything here is so far very application specific, very stream processing oriented, being able to recognize things and to be able to compute, all of this kind of signal processing stuff. So Trevor, you showed a very interesting chart, which basically said for general purpose computing, ILP hasn't changed in 20 years. The parallelism. So
that was cores. That's purely for laptop applications.
Right. So that's typically been, I think, what's driven this kind of general purpose notion. And the question is, you know, even under Linux, you can get 80 processes. Okay, so maybe you're not context switching, but you know, you're not running Excel and your email any faster. It's almost like who cares? And with the singular exception of PowerPoint, which seems to need unlimited processing power, it's hard to imagine why what we have really isn't kind of good enough. So is the only thing we're talking about are what are those special purpose applications, and being able to spawn tons of operations to do what has historically been kind of considered application-specific signal processing. And so will we care at all about, you know...
Well, the one thing that you mentioned in the laptop or whatever, the communication device, that takes all the computation power is the signal processor. And you can't obviously offload that because you need connections to the... So that's something that you've spent the last few years worrying about. But that, you I think, are well aware of that. There's an almost infinite capable opportunity for dumping compute power into that problem, particularly if we have things like cognitive radio, where the radio spectrum is being used much more efficiently, and you have much more sophisticated signaling, and you're going to start having to have a general purpose multi-core style machine in there just to do the communications. Forget about the application. Yeah, the word's going to take nothing. You don't need that. Looking up something on a database can be done at a remote site. But the communications, if you want instant response and reception everywhere, then you're going to have to dump a lot more compute power into your phone and laptop and so on. So there's one opportunity.
And the question is that a general purpose computer that's doing all that? Or are those a whole bunch of different special purpose computers?
I can't answer the question leaving stuff out. I couldn't think of anything.
So you would call a Pentium 4 a collection of special purpose computers?
No, but
because
that's
it has a floating point unit, which is, try to do floating point without a floating point unit.
Well, they tried it for a while.
What, I'm sorry?
They tried it for a while, but...
That's right, and then they, yeah, right, the yo-yos, and then they realized that it really makes sense to build a piece of hardware that operates on a floating point data type.
But
I must have missed your slide this morning that he was referring to. What was the, can you, in 10 words, tell him?
Well, we just measured applications and looked at the parallelism. Typically, a range of applications that you get on a laptop. So Chris, when he was a graduate student, did it. That's 10 years ago, right? And we just did it again a few months ago. And
this is the amount of parallelism in the application. What?
And the number of cores that you can use. The number of threads that are truly parallel, that are not blocks or...
So you weren't referring to ILP at all, or any of the stuff in the microarchitecture that has included those?
It's much more macro level.
Yeah. And how much of that is due to the people not thinking of the algorithm?
Absolutely. I don't know. It's an observation based on evidence, which is unusual in computer architecture.
But that's how long it took Microsoft to use virtual memory on 386 after the 386 came out with virtual memory.
Sure. I mean, I think one of the biggest issues, if you want to sort of look into the parallelism story, unless it's very application specific, or you're building sort of a service to do throughput, is we have not had much success at parallelizing algorithms in general, unless they've sort of got a natural parallelism that jumps out at you. And you might want to start thinking about the fact that it might actually be possible. Because this has been around since I was in graduate school. Before the internet, by the way, before most of the developments in computers, people were looking at and building parallel machines. And they could use them on things like partial differential equations, things that just scream out to be done in parallel, or finite element, or something like that. And video, obviously, not in those days, but I mean today, that's another. application that seems to, you know, on casual inspection, be parallel.
So
But-
people got their hands up, Trevor, and it's after 1 o'clock, and we said we would end. Oh, continue?
Yes.
So we don't have to worry about the bus or anything? Okay, good, good. No, that's fine with me. I thought that we'd break now and then the energy would continue tomorrow, but if you want to continue now, absolutely. So, you got your hand up? Go ahead. Go ahead, yeah.
So to the detection of parallelism, so there's, in our department, they're doing some work with us to automate this. So,
To do what now?
to automatically.
Automate the barrel.
Parallelism and actually change the application to exploit it. And yeah, so from what I see, it is a difficult problem, but the advancements that have been made are, I would think, quite substantial. And usually you have two problems now. One is detecting parallelism, and the other is then mapping it on the actual architecture, because those things seem to change quite quickly, right? So the mapping onto your multi-core desktop might be different than if you go to cell processor or things like that. So, but although it's been a problem for a long time, I think we're actually improving on it, and why not?
But I think the problem is even harder than that, because I think the observation, you know, that we made 10 years ago on these workloads, and then we were arguing that 2 cores is really good. That was the thrust of that paper, because it actually helped interactive performance. And now 10 years later we're saying, well, 2 is still pretty good, maybe 3 if you're a cutting edge user. But the observation is that there are lots and lots of threads. There's parallelism. People have done work in that 10 years to make things more parallel. Where they struggle is making that parallelism balanced. Right? These threads, it doesn't matter if you have a thread that is 1/10 the length of the other one, because they're, you know, it's a kind of version of Amdahl's law. It's just the less parallel part of the code actually ends up dominating the more parallel bit, and the overall advantage is significantly reduced. And I think that bit, I'm not sure anybody has handled it. It's not just about finding the threads, finding the balance between those threads and then using them to actually get the speed up. And it seems like in the 10 years, it hasn't happened. Now, the feedback we got after that paper was, well, actually it's only been 5 years since people can buy these computers, so maybe we should write another paper in 5 years and measure it again. But it's not a very optimistic scenario unless you take the domain-specific applications and use and parallelize those. There's a lot of parallels in those, video code, imaging code, you know, the server programs. But in general, I'd love to be proved wrong. I think it could help everybody greatly if your tools actually did this.
It may be a holy grail, you know, in general. So
What?
I said it may be in search of a holy grail.
And there are...
And it's always the audience, or the typical pushback is, yeah, but we're working, just what you said. Hey, we're working on it. I know some guys are just about to do it. Well, I've been holding my breath for 30 years now.
Yeah, but if you're looking for a general solution, well, so I agree with you. Good in general, that's very difficult. But let's say practical or pragmatical in that respect.
Okay, do it for a web browser.
Applications I'm using, and you mentioned the video encoding, for example. You have your legacy algorithms for this, your libraries. You don't want to go over this again and parallelize it. You want this to be done automatically for you. So, I mean, look, you have to start somewhere. So,
Well,
the general
this
solution
actually
is hard, but
it's already very nicely parallelized, so that domain is okay. I like to take a web browser, for example. I'd love you to speed that up automatically. And,
Wait, there's no reason of speeding up work, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, but some people, and this includes a lot of artists, architects, a lot of people in the creative community, use all these programs, Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator, all these things that are extremely slow. And these programs use gigabytes of files, right? One Adobe Illustrator file for a big poster is 3 gigabytes. And you have to process it. Okay, so the same person uses Word on the same machine and Adobe Illustrator with like 3 gigabyte image file. What do? Do you need parallelism? Do you need codes? Maybe you don't need them all at the same time, right? Sometimes you need just one.
Right. No, I'm not arguing. I mean, a better way of looking at it, which maybe addresses what you're saying, is what you're trying to buy is response time. So you might have this course sitting there so you can get something, for instance, render an image or something quickly, because you want some quality of experience. You don't want to sit and wait for it. It's going through one core.
Same as games, right? Virtual worlds.
But
You have to render all these in 3D now. In 3D, not stacked 3D, 3D vision, right? 3D is coming, you have to
True,
render
but
games in 3D.
Exactly, so, but interestingly, these things aren't that parallel today. And even though people have made this observation 10 years ago, and I remember when we wrote that paper, games was a big example of how they're going to be rendered and parallelized. And we know 10 years, and you know, they're not.
No, but they're parallelized on NVIDIA GPU.
Yeah, the
right?
graphics bit is runs in parallel, yes. But even in games, it's it's utilizing that graphics processor. I mean, some of them get up to 70% utilization. Most of them are down to 20 games, high-end graphics. I think a lot of the benefits of multi-core actually practically are there because they have more caches on the chip. So actually, these applications like the Photoshop one gets better with multi-core because you have more caches on the chip, not because you have more cores. There are all these other, and there was actually a paper, it wasn't in this, where they were looking at how do you do software optimization for those multiple caches as opposed to parallelization, and worrying about the memory systems seemed to remove more of those end bottlenecks than the parallelization did. So I think that's the, on the parallelism track, the thing that worries me is that, we saw how we got into gigahertz computers in the 90s, Pentium 4 concluded that beautiful experiment with incredibly deep pipelines. And I think the architecture community may be trying to do the same experiment with the number of cores now. Larger number is better. And the evidence is that, it's good for some stuff, but you really have to balance them and worry about the bottlenecks. And when you do worry about them, I just don't see how we're going to get to very, very large numbers. I think we are getting to large numbers, but not the hundreds.
So I wouldn't blame the Pentium 4 on deep pipelines. I would blame the Pentium 4 on the fact they try to do too many new things before they really understood any of them. So Pentium 4 had SMT, it had a trace cache, it had a deep pipeline, it had the fireball that allows you to do back-to-back arithmetics in twice the frequency. So the chip they shipped was 3.8 gigahertz, they were doing back-to-back adds at 7.6 gigahertz. The number of picoseconds that go into 7.6. So I would actually congratulate Intel and even trying to experiment rather than put them down that it was because of the deep pipeline that it failed. Who knows? Maybe
I don't think it failed. I think it was quite successful.
a lot of people say that.
But I think their marketing failed because they did not realize what was important. And I think their marketing department told them, look, people want gigahertz. And I think marketing people change their mind overnight. So believing what marketing told you was the failure.
Well, and that in fact is always the case, believe me, in marketing. In fact, we say critical path design is when you design to the maximum of the speed path in the chip, and what marketing demands will be the cycle time of the chip. There's one point that is automate. Why the preoccupation with automate? Why does it have to be done automatically? Why isn't it? In fact, I think this was part of Manolis' thing that computers do certain things better than humans, and humans do certain things better than computers. And why don't we?
I was going to add that I have seen cases where changing the algorithm changes the amount of parallelism that is available. So yes, perhaps you would extract parallelism from a program that was written sequentially, but then changing the data structures, changing the algorithm may very well dramatically change.
And that's done by the person, or that's done automatically? We have these machine learning yo-yos out there.
It's very difficult to change the algorithm.
Huh? I'm sorry?
I said it's difficult to change.
I agree.
You can play around with the data flow, but you can't change it.
It should be easier to drive the car.
It's provably undecidable, so we know that it can't be done by a computer in the general sense.
Sorry to interrupt you.
I was ready to break it at 1 o'clock, but your
You
colleague...
wanted to have more time.
Your colleague said that, no, keep going, it's going great. I wanted to break it when it was still going fantastic, it's still going fantastic. The hope is that people will think about this between now and tomorrow, and we can pick it up with more from the audience.
Good.